Lost in Space, 1965 to 1968, took audiences on thrilling adventures across the galaxy, mixing sci-fi wonder with family drama and unforgettable characters like the Robinsons, Dr. Smith, and the iconic robot. Decades later, the show still holds a special place in the hearts of fans as one of TV's most nostalgic cult classics. But it's been nearly 60 years since the series ended. So what happened to the cast after leaving the Jupiter 2 behind? Where did their careers and lives take them? And who is still with us in 2025? Join us as we revisit the stars of Lost in Space and uncover their fascinating journeys through Hollywood and beyond. Guy Williams was born on January 14, 1924, and took the role of Dr. John Robinson in 1965 at age 41. The calm patriarch who guided his family through intergalactic turmoil with logic and authority. Fans saw a steady professor of astrophysics, but the man behind the role lived a double life filled with restless ambition and disillusionment. Raised in a working-class Italian-American family in New York, Williams endured bullying over his heritage and lanky frame, retreating into books and fencing to mask insecurities. Hollywood initially adored him as Zorro, yet the transition to Lost in Space exposed his vulnerabilities. After early stardom, roles dried up, and whispers of arrogance and demands for higher pay alienated producers. He bristled at being trapped in the shadow of his masked hero persona and clashed with Lost in Space's creative direction, often resenting the campy tone that reduced his serious talents to comic melodrama. Rumors swirled of tense encounters with co-stars, and some insiders claimed he was prone to long absences, more devoted to chess clubs and social gatherings in Argentina than the set itself. Personally, he endured a rocky marriage to model Janice Cooper, marked by long separations and accusations of infidelity on both sides. Though adored in Argentina for Zorro, Hollywood had already abandoned him, and he retreated in semi-exile, living comfortably off investments but increasingly isolated. His most humiliating professional blow came when attempts at a comeback in the late 1970s failed spectacularly. Casting directors refused to see him, dismissing him as yesterday's matinee idol. On April 30, 1989, he died alone in his Buenos Aires apartment from a ruptured aneurysm, his body discovered days later. His estate, worth around $1 million, included Argentine properties and investments, but the man once idolized as a swashbuckling hero died estranged from Hollywood, a legend overshadowed by whispers of pride, missteps, and the crushing silence of forgotten fame. Jonathan Harris, born November 6, 1914, in the Bronx, played Dr. Zachary Smith in 1965 at the age of 51, transforming the character from a ruthless saboteur into a flamboyant, cowardly anti-hero whose wit and one-liners turned him into the true star of Lost in Space. To the audience, Smith was hilarious, treacherous, and strangely lovable, yet Harris himself was a far more complicated figure. Raised in a poor immigrant family, mocked for his heavy accent and thin frame, he buried his insecurities beneath a cultivated, aristocratic persona that would later define his public image. Behind the elegant diction, however, lay a merciless perfectionist whose hunger for control alienated many colleagues. On set, he secretly rewrote his lines, demanded special guest star billing, and bullied producers into reshaping episodes around him, earning admiration from fans, but resentment from co-stars who felt overshadowed. His career outside the show faltered when networks branded him too theatrical, and his most humiliating professional blow came when a much-anticipated spin-off collapsed before production. leaving him bitter about being forever tied to Smith. Off-screen, Harris's marriage endured, but he was notorious for his vanity, obsession with tailored suits, and reported affairs with younger actresses, details whispered but rarely confronted publicly. He also carried deep scars from losing close friends in Hollywood, fueling an almost neurotic devotion to work. Harris died on November 3, 2002, in Encino, California, just 3 days shy of his 88th birthday, from a blood clot to the heart. His estate, valued at about $1 million, was modest compared to his notoriety, consisting of his home, royalties, and investments, yet his influence on sci-fi archetypes remains unmatched. Forever, the flamboyant villain audiences couldn't resist. Mark Goddard was born on July 24, 1936, and assumed the role of Major Don West in 1965 at just 29. The brash pilot of the Jupiter 2, whose fiery clashes and impulsive choices injected volatility into Lost in Space. Audiences loved his swagger and recklessness, but Goddard's life mirrored his character more than he admitted: restless, defiant, and marked by self-sabotage. Raised in Lowell, Massachusetts, he grew up poor and was ridiculed for his thick accent and awkward adolescence, driving him to conceal shame with bravado. His Hollywood trajectory was volatile. After early fame, he grew frustrated at being typecast as the hot-headed action man, and by the second season of Lost in Space, he resented the camp tone and Harris's growing dominance in storylines, leading to clashes that became legendary on set. Off-screen, his reputation was turbulent. Stories of bar fights, drunken outbursts, and failed auditions circulated. He burned bridges with producers who found him unreliable and difficult. His deepest professional humiliation came when he was all but blacklisted after openly criticizing Irwin Allen, the show's producer, a move that cost him prime opportunities in television. His personal life was just as chaotic. 3 marriages collapsed amid accusations of infidelity, neglect, and volatile temper. He struggled to maintain ties with his children, who often described him as distant. Haunting him for decades was his link to Karen Kupchinet's mysterious 1963 death. He had been among the last to see her alive, and, though never implicated, gossip tabloids tied his name to the scandal, casting a shadow over his rising career. Later years brought redemption of sorts. He became a teacher of special education, but insiders whispered it was more necessity than choice after Hollywood shut its doors. His memoir, To Space and Back, revealed bitterness at his treatment, masked by nostalgia. On October 10, 2023, he died of pulmonary fibrosis in Massachusetts at 87, leaving behind an estate of about $3 million, a modest fortune for a man once seen as television's next big action star. His story remains one of unfulfilled promise, scandal-ridden detours, and a restless spirit who never quite outran the shadow of his failures. Dee Hartford, born April 21, 1928, in Salt Lake City, Utah, was 38 when she became Verda in 1966, the statuesque android whose serene beauty and hints of emotion made her an unforgettable presence on Lost in Space. Fans adored the quiet dignity she brought to a role that might have been hollow, turning Verda into a cult figure for sci-fi audiences. But Hartford's real life was a far cry from robotic serenity. Raised in a strict Mormon household, she rebelled early, fleeing to New York to become a Vogue model, where she was both celebrated for her icy glamour and preyed upon by older men. She married director Howard Hawks, a union that seemed glamorous but was rife with manipulation, infidelity, and bitter fights that left her emotionally scarred. Hollywood gossip circled around her tangled romantic life, from her sister's marriage to Groucho Marx to her own rumored affairs with married actors, fueling an image of a woman who used beauty as both weapon and shield. Her career was rocky. Though she appeared in cult shows like Batman and The Twilight Zone, she was accused of being temperamental and was quietly dropped from several productions for clashing with directors. Her greatest professional disappointment was being passed over for a major film role Hawks had initially promised her, a betrayal that haunted her and effectively stalled her film ambitions. Off-screen, she struggled with alcohol dependence and depression, particularly after her divorce, and though she maintained a polished facade, friends spoke of lonely years in rented apartments, clinging to guest spots for income. Her later life was calmer, marked by seclusion and quiet bitterness at the career she believed Hollywood had stolen from her. Hartford died on October 21, 2018, in Palm Desert, California, at age 90. Her estate, valued around $1 million, included jewelry, art, and modest investments. But her true legacy remains that of a glamorous woman whose beauty concealed heartbreak, scandal, and decades of Hollywood's unforgiving cruelty. Sheila Allen was born on February 2, 1929, and in 1965, at age 36, she joined Lost in Space as Aunt Gamma, a boisterous theatrical presence who brought melodrama and flourish to the Robinsons universe. Her character mirrored her real-life persona, commanding, larger than life, and unwilling to be ignored. Born in New York City, Allen's early life was marked by emotional neglect, growing up in a family fractured by financial hardship and parental indifference, which drove her toward performance as a refuge from pain. She rose through opera and Broadway, but behind the scenes, she was often dismissed for being too domineering, with critics mocking her grandiose style. Her marriage to producer Irwin Allen gave her entry into Hollywood, but it also sparked whispers that her career was propped up by nepotism, leading to tension with colleagues who resented her presence on his productions. Rumors of Allen manipulating casting decisions to favor her caused rifts on set, and her greatest failure was her inability to establish a strong identity beyond Irwin's shadow. Her acting career never achieved true acclaim. Her marriage, though enduring, was marked by volatility, and friends spoke of frequent shouting matches that revealed the imbalance of power between the ambitious Sheila and the egotistical Irwin. After his death in 1991, Sheila controlled his production empire, fiercely protective of his legacy, yet accused of being ruthless and dismissive in negotiations. Privately, she faced loneliness and ill health, culminating in pulmonary fibrosis that drained her vitality. She died on November 15, 2013, in Malibu, California, at 84. Her estate, estimated between $2 and $3 million, included rights to Irwin Allen's productions, ensuring continued royalties. Despite the glamour of wealth, her story reflects the cost of being overshadowed, remembered both as a custodian of Irwin's empire and as a woman often accused of wielding power through fear and control. Michael Rennie was born on August 25, 1909, in Idle, England, and at 57 in 1966, he stepped into the role of the Keeper, the towering, enigmatic alien who presided over caged interstellar beasts in Lost in Space, a performance that carried echoes of his most famous turn as Klaatu in The Day the Earth Stood Still. His Keeper was coldly majestic, exuding a strange dignity that unsettled viewers, but Rennie's real life contained the same contradictions, charm masking turmoil. Raised in post-war poverty, his youth was scarred by constant ridicule for his height and aloofness, which he turned into tools for screen gravitas. His career soared in the 1950s, yet by the mid-1960s he was in decline, plagued by rumors of arrogance and cruelty toward co-stars. His gravest professional humiliation came when 20th Century Fox abruptly dropped him after the studio labeled him box office poison, leaving him scrambling for television guest roles. Off-screen, his private life was a series of combustions, affairs with actresses and socialites, a stormy marriage ending in public divorce, and an illegitimate child whose existence haunted him. Known for drinking heavily, he often alienated colleagues, and gossip suggested he used his towering presence to intimidate rather than inspire. In his final years, Rennie lived in Switzerland, drifting between roles and lovers, estranged from Hollywood but clinging to fading fame. On June 10, 1971, he died suddenly in Harrogate, England, from an aortic aneurysm at 61, collapsing in a friend's home. His estate, valued between $1 to $2 million, reflected his prolific filmography of more than 50 movies. But the bitter truth was that his fortune dwindled quickly in the hands of creditors and estranged family, leaving his once majestic legacy clouded by personal ruin and whispered scandals. Leonard Stone was born on November 3, 1923, in Salem, Oregon, and in 1967, at age 44, he appeared in Lost in Space as Farnham the Great, the flamboyant charlatan magician whose flashy bravado masked cowardice, a character that resonated eerily with the contradictions in Stone's own life. On screen, Farnham was ridiculous and theatrical, yet Stone's performance gave him depth, a huckster who was both laughable and strangely human. But Stone's childhood was marked by constant loss. His father died when he was young, forcing him into odd jobs during the Depression while enduring the sting of classmates mocking his poverty. His career was long but uneven. Despite a Tony Award, he was frequently rejected for leading roles, branded too eccentric, and shuffled into supporting parts. His deepest professional wound came when a Broadway revival he was attached to collapsed in scandal over financial mismanagement, leaving him publicly humiliated and unemployed. He was notorious among colleagues for being combative during rehearsals, often clashing with directors, and whispers followed him about an addiction to gambling that drained his paychecks. Personally, his marriages were riddled with instability, marked by arguments over money and his inability to stay grounded, though he kept such chaos shielded from the public. A Navy veteran who prided himself on discipline, he nevertheless spiraled into bouts of depression, especially after losing close friends in Hollywood and watching his roles diminish with age. Even his quirky late-life appearance on Wheel of Fortune in 2000, where he won $4,250 and a Bermuda trip, carried an air of desperation. A veteran actor reduced to chasing trivia show prizes. He died on November 2, 2011, in San Diego, just one day before his 88th birthday, from cancer. His estate, valued between $1 to $2 million, came from decades of character acting, though much was eaten up by medical bills, leaving behind a legacy of tireless but turbulent work, his flamboyant screen presence concealing a lifetime of private struggles. Albert Salmi was born on March 11, 1927, and in 1966, at 39, he appeared in Lost in Space as Alonzo P. Tucker, the wild-eyed space pirate whose manic energy and unpredictable comedy mirrored the storm inside the actor himself. On screen, Tucker was chaotic, yet magnetic, but Salmi's personal demons made the role eerily close to truth. Born in Brooklyn to struggling Finnish immigrants, he endured poverty, bullying, and a strict, emotionally distant upbringing that left him resentful and fiercely guarded. A gifted actor trained by Lee Strasberg, Salmi despised Hollywood, calling film work shallow compared to theater. Yet he relied on it to survive. His career was riddled with turbulence. He refused to attend the Oscars after being nominated for a Golden Globe, openly insulting studio executives, and developed a reputation as hostile, volatile, and impossible to manage. He lost multiple roles due to drunken altercations, and his greatest professional failure came when his belligerent behavior on the set of a major 1970s film led to his dismissal, a scandal that crippled his career momentum. His personal life was equally explosive. His marriage to actress Peggy Ann Garner collapsed in bitter divorce, and his second marriage to Roberta Pollock Taper descended into abuse and violent arguments. His daughters distanced themselves from his unpredictable rages, and he lived increasingly isolated, drinking heavily and consumed by bitterness over a career he felt cheated him. Depression and financial struggles plagued him, and by 1990, his marriage had disintegrated. On April 22, 1990, in Spokane, Washington, he committed a shocking act. He shot Roberta before turning the gun on himself, dying at 63 in what became one of Hollywood's darkest murder-suicides. His estate, worth around $1 million, was overshadowed by scandal and legal battles, leaving a legacy defined not by his immense talent, but by violence, anger, and a tragic implosion that Hollywood has rarely dared to discuss openly. June Lockhart was born on June 25, 1925, and stepped into the role of Maureen Robinson in 1965 at age 40. The nurturing matriarch whose quiet strength anchored the family in the void of space. On screen, she was serene, elegant, and unfailingly composed. But Lockhart's life was far less orderly. Her childhood was steeped in privilege, yet emotionally barren. Daughter of actors Jean and Kathleen Lockhart, she grew up in the shadow of a domineering father and an ambitious mother who pushed her into the spotlight, leaving June desperate to prove herself while hiding crippling insecurities. Though she won a Tony and worked steadily, her career was riddled with turbulence. Directors described her as brilliant but fiery, prone to feuding over scripts, and whispers spread of her alienating colleagues with biting wit. During Lost in Space, tension simmered between her and other cast members. Mark Goddard, in particular, resented her maternal airs off-screen, while Lockhart herself complained about scripts focusing too much on Jonathan Harris's Dr. Smith. Off-camera, her personal life was tumultuous. 2 marriages ended bitterly, one amid accusations of neglect, and another after explosive disputes over money. Her daughters Anne and Elizabeth spoke of a distant, career-obsessed mother who often left them in the care of others. Despite her public grace, insiders noted a rebellious streak. She frequented underground clubs in the 1960s, courted scandal by introducing teen co-stars to drugs and rock music, and privately wrestled with depression. Her darkest career failure came with a string of forgettable television roles in the 1970s that nearly bankrupted her, salvaged only by voice work and convention appearances. Now, at 125, she remains a survivor, celebrated yet often described as one of Hollywood's most complex matriarchs. Her net worth, around $10 million, is built from real estate, royalties, and a lifetime of performances. But behind the medals and honors lies the portrait of a woman who masked rebellion, heartbreak, and relentless ambition beneath the smile of television's perfect mother. Fritz Feld was born on October 15, 1900, and in 1966, at age 66, he appeared on Lost in Space as Mr. Zumdish, the flamboyant, eccentric manager of the Celestial department store, delivering comedic absurdity that matched his signature pop sound made by smacking his mouth with his hand. On screen, he exuded whimsy, but privately, Feld's life carried far darker undertones than audiences ever imagined. Born into a troubled Berlin household marked by financial instability and a cold, dismissive father, young Fritz endured relentless teasing for his accent, mannerisms, and fragile frame, masking pain with theatricality. His Hollywood career, though spanning more than 140 films, was riddled with humiliations. He was typecast as an eccentric foreigner, often mocked by colleagues who saw him as little more than a clown. Feld developed a reputation for arrogance. He was known to belittle co-stars, interrupt rehearsals with unsolicited advice, and even once stormed off a set after accusing a director of sabotaging his timing. His greatest professional failure came when he lobbied aggressively for a prominent role in a major 1950s studio film, only to be publicly rejected after word of his difficult behavior spread, leaving him humiliated and ostracized for years. His marriage to actress Virginia Christine was both glamorous and stormy. While publicly harmonious, insiders whispered about Feld's notorious temper and controlling tendencies, which left Christine increasingly isolated. Despite this, they remained together, bound by a strange codependency. Feld privately struggled with the deaths of family during the war, bouts of depression, and professional irrelevance as his roles dwindled. He died on November 18, 1993, at 93 in Los Angeles from natural causes. His estate was estimated between $500,000 and $1 million, sustained largely through decades of steady work and his wife's lucrative Folgers commercials, leaving a legacy of a man who masked bitterness and insecurity with comic flamboyance. Marta Kristen, born February 26, 1945, in Oslo, Norway, became Judy Robinson in 1965 at just 20 years old, embodying the eldest Robinson daughter, dreamy, romantic, and the eternal voice of yearning for earth and human connection. Her origins were far darker than the idyllic character she played. Born to a Finnish mother and a German soldier father who was killed in World War II, Marta spent her early years abandoned in a Norwegian orphanage, a lonely child marked by ridicule for being the enemy's child. Adopted by an American professor, she was shipped across the Atlantic, forced to conceal her true heritage. Fame came fast but cruel. She was typecast as a beauty, endlessly auditioning for roles that sexualized her rather than celebrated her talent. And she privately seethed at being reduced to a sci-fi pinup. Her greatest humiliation came in the 1970s, when a high-profile audition for a major studio film fell apart after a producer publicly mocked her accent and dismissed her as television pretty. Scandals swirled about her stormy love life. An early marriage collapsed in acrimony. Rumors of infidelity haunted her, and later relationships reportedly turned toxic, leaving her isolated. Alcohol was a whispered crutch during these years, and friends claimed her bitterness at Hollywood's rejection consumed her. She struggled financially, supplementing acting with over 40 commercials, a stark fall from her prime. Personal tragedies weighed heavily, including the loss of close friends to drugs and illness, which pushed her further into reclusion. Though she re-emerged briefly with a cameo in the 1998 Lost in Space film, the industry had long moved on. Now in her late 70s, Marta lives quietly, her net worth between $100,000 and $1 million, a modest legacy for someone once adored as the face of interstellar youth. Her story reveals not stardom, but survival, marked by scars of abandonment, failed love, and a career that promised galaxies, yet delivered only fragments. Angela Cartwright, born September 9, 1952, in Altrincham, England, entered American homes in 1965, at age 13, as Penny Robinson. The tender middle child, whose empathy toward alien life made her a beacon of innocence on Lost in Space. To audiences, she was angelic, but her real childhood was harsher. Uprooted from England, she was teased mercilessly in Los Angeles schools for her accent, treated as an outsider, and pressured to hide her insecurities behind a perfect child star image. Though she had already found fame in The Sound of Music, Hollywood's cruelty surfaced quickly. Directors accused her of being difficult when she asked for breaks, and peers whispered about her mother's overbearing control, which left her emotionally suffocated. Her career peaked early, and the collapse of her acting trajectory in the 1970s was her most devastating failure. Casting agents dismissed her as a washed-up child star, and the rejection fueled years of bitterness. While she reinvented herself as a photographer and author, scandal clung quietly to her private life. Her marriage, though long-standing, was rumored to endure turbulence, and at least one affair was whispered about in industry circles. Friends described her as controlling and quick-tempered, particularly during the height of her career frustrations. She endured further anguish when close family members battled illness, leaving her struggling with depression. Financial stability came later, but not without years of precarious hustling, including underpaid convention appearances. Though she eventually built a respectable career in the arts, insiders claimed she never escaped resentment toward Hollywood for abandoning her. Today, at 73, she has an estimated net worth of $5 to $6 million, built from photography, book sales, and residuals. But her fortune tells only part of the story. Behind the beloved image of Penny lies a woman whose journey was riddled with rejection, marital strain, and the burden of once having the world at her feet, only to be cast aside when she outgrew her innocence. Bill Mumy, born February 1, 1954, in San Gabriel, California, became the face of intergalactic innocence in 1965 at age 11, playing Will Robinson, the curious, brave child whose bond with the robot defined Lost in Space. To fans, he was a child prodigy and moral anchor. Behind the camera, he was a boy under constant scrutiny, forced to hide the psychological strain of fame. Raised in an unstable household marked by financial stress, he was mocked by peers as the robot kid, fueling a loneliness he carried into adulthood. His career, while prolific, was fraught with rejection. Hollywood saw him as a novelty, and after Lost in Space ended, he spiraled into typecasting. His darkest professional failure came in the early 1970s, when a highly promoted TV pilot he starred in was canceled after one episode, crushing his confidence and branding him unreliable. Off-screen, Mumy courted controversy through his music. His cult duo Barnes and Barnes produced Fish Heads, a bizarre hit some critics derided as obscene, sparking whispers about his mental state. Rumors of drug use in the late 70s followed him, and insiders spoke of clashes with record executives over his eccentric behavior. His personal life bore cracks, too. Though married since 1986, there were quiet reports of infidelity and tension, and his son once publicly described their relationship as distant. Financially, Mumy survived by diversifying: voice acting, writing comic books, and conventions. Yet beneath the fan adoration, he wrestled with depression and the weight of being forever remembered as a boy, rather than the artist he longed to be. Now, 71, he maintains a net worth of about $10 million, built on decades of relentless work across media. But his story is less about triumph than about a child actor's survival in an industry that never truly let him grow up. Bettina Marcus was born in 1937 in Brooklyn, New York, and in 1966, at age 29, she embodied Athena, the hypnotic green lady of Lost in Space, whose seduction and guile lured the Robinsons into traps that blurred the line between beauty and danger. On screen, Athena radiated sensual menace, yet audiences were captivated by her allure. But Marcus's real story was far darker than her brief screen role suggested. She grew up in a volatile household, her parents constantly fighting over money, leaving her to absorb neglect and humiliation. Teased for her Brooklyn accent and angular looks, she hardened quickly, hiding her pain behind ambition. Hollywood rewarded her exotic beauty, but punished her refusal to play submissive. She was labeled difficult, blacklisted by producers who resented her sharp tongue. Her biggest career collapse came after a scandal involving Steve Gravers, her husband, whose violent outbursts led to a bitter divorce that branded her as unstable by association. Rumors tied her romantically to Rory Calhoun, a notorious womanizer with mob connections, and their daughter, Athena Calhoun, grew up in the glare of gossip columns, later achieving fame as a Las Vegas showgirl crowned World's Most Beautiful in 1987, a legacy Marcus viewed with both pride and shame. She left Hollywood by the late 1960s, reinventing herself in Las Vegas real estate, though whispers about financial missteps and affairs with wealthy clients dogged her. Now, in her late 80s, she lives quietly with an estimated fortune between $1 and $2 million, wealth built from both fleeting stardom and property deals. Though her name lingers more as a cautionary tale of a woman too outspoken for her time than as the immortal green lady who once bewitched primetime television. Thank you for joining us on this nostalgic journey through classic television history. If you enjoyed learning about the cast of Lost in Space and where they are now, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more vintage Hollywood retrospectives, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your memories and suggestions, so let us know which TV show or movie cast you'd like us to feature next.